All right, guys, I am going to go over the hearing and ear stuff for you in case I had some people ask that I do my own recordings or they could watch the Mandy Rice ones, which are also amazing. So I'm just doing this to give you a choice. And then after this unit, probably when you decide which one you prefer, we're just going to probably stick with that from here on out so I kind of know. All right, so the ear and hearing. This is all stuff that's not necessary, but it's super interesting stuff about hearing. It's the first sense that actually develops in the womb. Babies learn sounds. They know their mother's voice. They can actually be trained to like certain types of music because they can hear it. And hearing is kind of a cool sense because it's really the last one to shut off when we fall asleep, and then the first one to return when we come back. Maybe one of the reasons why if you fell asleep with the TV on or something, you actually like incorporated that into your dream or something. So it's really important to us. Vision always kind of takes center stage, and we believe that. We kind of go with our eyes more than anything, but hearing is still a really crucial one. Audition gives us language, which we'll talk about more when we get to the language chapter, but without our ability to hear, a lot of language wouldn't exist. Obviously, we do have people that speak sign language, but when we talk about audition, it's one of those things that hearing allows us to give meaning to sounds and interpret them in certain ways. So it's kind of a cool thing. All right. So we've talked about amplitude and wavelength yesterday when we did the eye. Amplitude is going to be how tall or short the wave is, and then wavelength is how close are the peaks or how far away are they. So we come back to it with hearing, and if you remember from the eye, wavelength detects the hue or the color that you're seeing, and for us, wavelength, or they call it frequency here, which is the same thing, it's going to be what pitch you hear or what like note you're hearing, what tone. And then amplitude for height, for color, or for eyesight, it was how bright or dull the color was. For here, amplitude or the height of the wave deems how loud something is. So the taller the wave, the louder it is. The shorter the wave, the quieter. Which makes kind of sense because even as I like record this, when I see my microphone stuff, when I get louder, it goes up higher, right? And that's just how actually my ears are reacting to it too, or interpreting the wave. So for us, we have frequency or wavelength, same thing. How frequent do you have a peak occurring? It's measured in hertz. And so when we have a higher frequency, when the waves are closer together, it's higher pitch notes versus when they're longer and more stretched out and less frequent with the peaks or longer wavelengths, it's going to be lower notes. So our threshold for sound is limited just like our ability to see the light spectrum or all those wavelengths. For us, we can hear what ranges of sounds from 20 to 20,000 hertz. It depends on what animal you are because we all can pick up different ones, right? Pigeons can pick up quieter sounds or lower sounds than us. And then we have bats and porpoises, which can hear higher than us. So it's kind of like I was thinking of like dogs with the dog whistles when people might train them. They sound like nothing to us, but the dogs can hear it. And that's because if you look at this picture, you can see that dogs have the ability to hear higher frequencies than us. All right, so we talked about amplitude already. Loud sounds are taller, soft sounds are shorter. Okay, I can't play this one on here because it won't record what my computer plays. But if you want to go and play on your computer or phone, if you look up a mosquito bite noise, it's this really cool thing where you have the ability when you're younger to hear higher pitched noises. But as we age, our ability to hear dwindles to some extent. We lose the ability to hear really high pitched noises. And we'll talk about why when we talk about hearing loss and what happens to the inner workings of your ear. But yeah, as we age, this dwindles. So for a while, mosquito bite noises, kids used to have them as ringtones on their phone in class. And if they had an old enough teacher, the teacher couldn't hear it because it was too high pitched, but all the other kids would hear and be looking around. So it's kind of this unique thing where you'd be able to hear it, but like your parents wouldn't. It's this really horrible high pitched noise that you won't enjoy hearing, but you have the ability to, while most of us don't. All right. Now, when it comes to the intensity of common sounds that we have, we measure volume, not pitch. Pitches and hertz, but decibels is how loud something is or how quiet something is. And we have to be pretty careful with our hearing because it is rather sensitive. We never want to get to the point where we're damaging our hearing. And if you look here, that wavy line is about what we want to stay at, nothing above that. But I always think of people who go to concerts a lot without earplugs, or even how loud you listen to your music in your earbuds that you shove directly in your ear canal. That can definitely cause hearing damage over time. Okay, now timbre is something that I don't really know if you need to know, but it's super interesting. So you could have the same notes or the same pitches being played on something, but it sounds drastically different. So if you have a musician that plays guitar and they play their song like on an acoustic guitar, let's say, then somebody takes that song and they play it on a piano or on a trumpet, it's going to sound super different, but it's still the same notes. It's just like the note C on a piano sounds different than a C on the trumpet compared to a C on the guitar, right? They're all the same note, but they sound different because they have different timbre. So if you watch this video, they play like dueling banjos. And so one's played on a guitar and one's playing on a banjo, and it sounds super different just because of the timbre, even though the notes are all the same. All right, so we're going to get into structures of the ear. So we'll look at the outer ear, middle ear, inner ear. All right, so if we look at our outer ear, it's the part of your ear that you can touch with your hands. You have the pinna, and then you have the auditory or ear canal, where don't shove your finger in it, but you could. And so the pinna is just the outer foldy parts of your ear. It's this whole actual piece that sticks out from your ear. The folds are there to help channel sound. So if you are listening to me right now, or if you want to just be a weirdo and talk to yourself, go like this when you're doing it. Cup your hands around your ears and make little like extenders of your ears, and everything gets a lot louder because now I'm catching more sound with my hands as extended ears, right? And so that's all the pinna's really there for, is all these folds created to put stuff in towards the ear canal. The whole thing is it's trying to funnel sound into the inner parts of your ear. So these help catch the sound waves, because really when we think about it, all sound is all these invisible waves coming at us and our ears grabbing them and then putting them into our ears. So the auditory canal or the ear canal, it's the same thing. It's an opening, right? It's just like a hallway in our ear. There's nothing really inside of that canal until we get to the eardrum. The eardrum, or the tympanic membrane, is the actual like proper name we'll use here for it. And that is something that we don't want to damage, and we'll talk about it more. So one of the reasons like you don't shove anything down your ear canal is because you don't want to damage or rupture your eardrum. Same thing like gross fact, but the fact that we have wax in our ear, it's to protect things from going in and hurting our middle and inner ear systems, right? The wax is supposed to get it stuck so nothing can get there to rupture our eardrum, because if you do that, it really hurts and it can damage your hearing over time. So if we look at the middle ear here, we're going to go over all of these parts. Tympanic membrane, and we use the words hammer, anvil, stirrup. We don't use the proper like Latin names. Hammer, anvil, stirrup, and then the oval window. Okay, so the eardrum, we just talked about how the tympanic membrane is at the end. So hypothetically, if I were to shove something far enough down my ear canal, I would run in to the tympanic membrane. That's like a tissue barrier. It's not a hard structure. It's easily punctured, right? Like if you have a really bad ear infection and it swells behind it, it can actually perforate or pop it or rip it. And so what this thing is I always think of it, this piece of tissue, or like I think of it like a piece of skin. And what happens is as the waves come into my ear down the ear canal, right, because they're actual waves, they go and like a timpani or a drum head, because that's what a tympanic membrane really is, the waves go and hit it, and when it hits it, the tympanic membrane starts wiggling. It starts moving. And as it moves, whatever speed the wave is on, like if it's a slow wave, the tympanic membrane will go slow. If it's a really fast wave, it's going to go, right? And so it's going to make, like, I always think of it like a game of mousetrap, right? The tympanic membrane is connected to all these things on the other side. So when it wiggles, it tugs on all the stuff inside your ear and carries the wave, carries the pulsation or the sound of the wave into your ear. So like I said, this is something we want to be careful not to damage. Attached to the other end of the tympanic membrane are the ossicles, which are just the collective name for the hammer, anvil, and stirrup, because they really don't have different functions beyond the fact that they have different names and are located in different places. But they're like 3 tiny little bones that just help transfer sound towards the cochlea. So hammer, anvil, stirrup is the way you want to remember that. So on the eardrum, as it's this piece of skin wiggling, the hammer is attached to one side, then that's attached to the anvil, then that's attached to the stirrup. So when your tympanic membrane starts wiggling because of the pulsation of the wave, it's kind of like the hammer gets tugged on. And then because the hammer is moving, the anvil starts being tugged on, and the anvil's moving, so the stirrup starts moving, right? They all start wiggling and being pulled around. And the stirrup is connected to something called the oval window. It's the surface of the cochlea. It's this one little section. It's like the, I don't know, a stretchy piece almost of the cochlea, where if the stirrup is connected to it, when the tympanic membrane starts wiggling, it pulls on this, right? It's connected to this piece of tissue on the cochlea, so it starts tugging. Right, this is the beginning piece. It's not considered part of the cochlea. It's just the surface. It's this extra, I don't know if it's an extra piece of skin even. It's just the point of contact where all of this happens. So it's just where the stirrup attaches to the cochlea. It has a unique name all on its own. And so because this oval window is connected to the cochlea is full of fluid. And so when this piece gets yanked on, it's going to cause ripple effects in the fluid in the cochlea. So for our inner ear, right, so we have the outer ear, which is just the pinna and the auditory canal. The middle ear is the tympanic membrane, and then the ossicles and the oval window. And then we get to the piece that actually lets you hear, which is the cochlea, the auditory nerve. And then the semicircular canals don't help with hearing per se for our purposes. It's going to be more to do with like balance. So the cochlea, if we were to ever be asked, what is the hearing organ? What organ lets you hear? It is the cochlea. It's that thing that's shaped like a snail cell in the ear, or a snail shell, sorry. And inside the cochlea, we have our receptor cells that do the transduction piece. It takes the sound waves and translates them into a neural impulse. So this is where transduction occurs inside of this. It's filled with fluid, and inside of those rings, the swirls, there's hairs. There's things called hair cells. Hair cells are to the ear as what rods and cones are to the eye. These are our receptor cells. So if we look inside the cochlea, there's this middle kind of pink thing as they've drawn it here, right? And that's going to be something called the basilar membrane. It divides the cochlea into 2 chambers, an upper chamber and a lower chamber. And the basilar membrane is where all the hair cells grow out of. Right, so like on both sides of the basilar membrane, you have all the hair cells poking out everywhere. And so for these hair cells, these are the receptor cells. If I had to label one thing as the actual small, tiny little cells that produce or transduce the neural impulse or into a neural impulse, this is it. So I've told you, AP stuff loves analogies. I like using analogies. So a great analogy here would be like, the rods and cones are to the eyes as hair cells are to the ear, right? Because these are what actually transmit the neural impulse, like create it, right? The sound waves cruise through here, the hair cells pick them up, and they start transforming it into a neural impulse. And then we have the auditory nerve that carries it away to your brain, right? Just like the optic nerve does it for your eye, the auditory nerve does it here. And instead of going to your occipital lobe, it goes to the part of your brain that processes sound, and that would be the temporal lobes. And then semicircular canals, these are these upright kind of almost N-shaped or upside down U-shaped things. And they help with the vestibular sense, which is your ability to monitor if you are upright, if you're sideways, if you're laying on your back, right? It's your body orientation in the world and your balance. So if I had you guys spin in circles right now and then stop, you'd have trouble balancing because the fluid is all spinning around in these things. And when you go like this, you're trying to get the water to level out in your ears. So they're used for balance. All right. Part 2 coming up.